So welcome everybody to today's episode of JNETWORK. We are so privileged, Thank you, MOSHE, for joining us. For those who don't know, and if you don't know him, you should have known him. Like, where have you been? MOSHE REUVEN is a Jewish American columnist and hip hop artist and internet celebrity and entrepreneur and my best part, rabbi as well. He was born in Hollywood, Florida. His debut single, which I love the line, by the way, I love the title, You're Not Alone, which is a super spiritual title. It topped the iTunes charts for the US, UK, and Canada. I just checked on Spotify, it's over 2 million hits. In Instagram, got over 1.5 million followers. And the famous Forbes magazine has you down as one of the most high-ranked top rising entrepreneurs. So without further ado, huge welcome to MOSHE. Nice to meet you, MOSHE. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. And I'm really appreciative. I got this really lovely Instagram message from you a few months ago, and you said, hi, nice to meet you. And from that, it was a beautiful opportunity to hopefully collab and give you a space to inspire the planet through JNETWORK. So if anybody else is on Instagram and feels that they could provide a value-added aspect of spirituality, just message me on Instagram or Facebook, and this could be you in the future. So without further ado, MOSHE, awesome to meet you. So I wanted to start, if it's okay with you, to talk a little bit about your journey, just to explain to the audience, to our followers, like, what's your journey? What's been your spiritual journey? How did you merge this amazing life of entrepreneur, rapper, rabbi? Tell us your journey, MOSHE.
It really came about because there was different parts of my life where there's different things that were my focus, and it just happened to be that they meshed together at some point later on. So I mean, growing up, I was inspired to see, like, my dad was more entrepreneurial than just working like a 9-to-5 style life. Although he started out in that area of life, seeing him trying to build something from scratch was very inspiring for me. So it was like something that I had in mind when I was really, really young. I'd want to do music. I always liked music growing up, but I wasn't never till my teenage years really trying to be one of the people that make music. I was more of an athlete. My brothers and I grew up as avid basketball players, and we were really big sports fans. So in school, you get a choice between band or some form of sports. Growing at different stages of school, and usually always it would be, obviously I'm going to go to do gym and play basketball. It was never, and then also, my mom at some point wanted us all to have an instrument that we played. So I mean, mine was guitar. I played guitar when I was in my early teens, like 11, 12, 13. And, but I didn't really last as long as I wish it did, to be honest, because just to keep it up outside, I wasn't like super motivated to be playing guitar. I just liked certain songs, and so certain songs were my focus, and that was about it. But when I got more in like my mid-teens, early to mid-teens, my friends would utilize, we would mess around, rapping together, like kind of as a joke, like not seriously. We were some white Jewish boys from Cooper City, so it wasn't like we were taking it as a probably other people at that age were. But as we did that more and more, or in different settings, it became more apparent that I was like really talented at it. I just had like a knack for it, and people would tell me that, and it became more of a hobby for me to like when I was in between classes to like be sending different songs back and forth between my friends and I. And when we would go to parties, when we weren't actively at the party or on the way there or hanging out after, it would just be something that we would do, like freestyle and stuff. But also that wasn't like super serious either. We were just messing around because I don't know, we it was part of our party experience, so to speak. But through this, like, I got better and better, and I just realized, like, wow, this is something I could probably be really good at if I really tried. And I did like the aspect of, like, noting down experiences, expressing myself, having like different witty wordplay, because especially when I was a huge hip hop head when I was younger, wordplay and lyrics were like everything. So, like, to mess around with friends and use our experiences in our life and our feelings to, like, say unique things that were either metaphors or, similes, and, or that had some witty way of tying to our lives and expressing ourselves in a certain way. It was fun. So it was something that I continued. And then at some point I became kind of passionate about it. I was like, I enjoyed it a lot, and we picked up frequency about how much we would use it too, and how often we would do that in different social settings. In general, I was very part of the social life of being a middle school, high school student. It was like of utmost importance to me, almost to some extent. When basketball took a back seat, that kind of took a front seat.
What was your Jewish journey like? How were you brought up Jewishly?
So I grew up conservative in South Florida, which I've realized over time that conservative in other places of the world is way different than conservative in South Florida. It's more like we didn't keep shops. Like, I know, like, in New York, New Jersey area, especially when my grandparents grew up, like, conservative was pretty like, you'd be pretty religious to be conservative. And at my shul and other shuls, there's always like that one or two people that are like that. But as far as like the general whole of the people at that shul, it was not. People are not super observant of all the mitzvahs, and I don't think we even know that there's 613 mitzvahs. I didn't know, so I was just like,
just 10, right? People think they were just 10. It was just 10.
It's like I didn't kill anyone today, so I'm good. So we learned, basics at Hebrew school growing up, like how to read Hebrew, stories of Moses and David and all the, and you learn all these things, but it's not like, doesn't necessarily connect to practical life except for good morals. And, when you get bar mitzvah, you really needed that, so otherwise, and I wasn't super serious about it either. I was just, it was also like social event to go to Hebrew school and hang out with friends, but I grew up conservative basically. And we'd have Hebrew school for a certain period of time till like around bar mitzvah age. Like once a week, or I think some years, mainly once a week, a couple of years, maybe twice a week. And that was about it. That was my Yiddishkeit, When I was really entrenched in like that aspect of life in high school, I started to have it, like, it started to lead to problems basically because I was so in depth, like, entrenched in it. And some of those problems were really eye-opening for me, like making me think about life and, helping me realize that, like, God really is is part of the show, is, at least part of it, if not making it. And, whereas before it's like, okay, I know there's God, I believe in God, I'm not a horrible person, and, I get good grades, and, I do what mommy and daddy ask of me generally. So, you don't really think so much about these things. You just grow up with your own, the way that you're raised is like what you should and shouldn't be doing, and what's good and what's not good, so to speak. But it became more real that, like, I should have a relationship with God. I have a relationship with God, whether I notice it or not. God's creating things in my life, and I have no idea why.
I did a little bit of research in you, and one of the few really striking things, number one, was that NDE described. You had your own kind of NDE. You happy to talk a little bit about it?
One of the things that led to, like, just involved in a lot of partying, I wasn't like a drug addict or anything. I didn't really do drugs, but we would we would we had fun, you know. So it led to a certain near death experience at parties.
Can you describe like what you saw? Like, I'm very into that, and I've given other like Jewish views of what people see. Can you describe a little bit what you saw?
To be completely like transparent, like I never even grew, like I never even had clarity whether it was a near death experience or just a bad trip or something. Um, but as far as the way I understood it, it was a near death experience. But you know, the kid that was hosting the party, maybe for like covering his ankles type thing, you know, was very forceful about, oh, there's nothing. You just yeah. So I don't really know ultimately, but I don't think it was as vivid as most people also explain their near death experience. Like usually when I hear people explain it, they're like their soul left their body and they're talking to God and like, you know, and like it's like, I don't know, maybe probably they really, really got to a certain point further than maybe I experienced something. I never grew a full like clarity about like this is what happened. Like I always like kind of had it in my mind like I'm not sure exactly what happened, because I can't really fully tell myself that I know for sure that that's what was happening and feel like sure, feel confident about it. It's something that you experience, you know. It's and unless like you're under a monitor that says your heart stopped or this or that, you know, or something like really bad, it's like not, it's not fully clear, at least for me. But basically I had seen like kind of like a visual of like what would happen if I were to pass away that day, like uh my with my family, like um you know, uh kind of like a visual of it being in the papers of 6-year-old kid leaves school early, goes to a midday party and, you know, dies in a basically from doing drugs or overdose or whatever. I don't think it was overdose. I think I wasn't like doing heavy, something like heavy or whatever. It was just you know, I think it was just like a shock to me that, you know, the system type thing, because I wasn't someone that did things like that, uh, like anything like drug that was like beyond just like marijuana or alcohol. And I wasn't even like a pothead either. Like, so I think it was just a shock, really.
So
But
that was a big turning point for you then, from that moment.
yeah, so that moment was a huge turning point because that experience of like seeing kind of like my life flash before my eyes and like experiencing like uh this whole play out of like events in my conscious of like this is what would happen if this was your last day and this is how you spent your time was really life changing for me because I was, even though I, you know, I wasn't a bad kid and I wasn't crazy, I wasn't like you know, flunking out of high school or anything. Like I was a good student, you know, and all the check boxes that your typical secular kid needs to reach are generally there. Um, you know, I definitely was not, you know, living a meaningful, purposeful life. I was just enjoying life, so to speak, and basically, I think that experience woke me up to like I have to be here for a reason. Like I can't just like have partied and enjoyed life with friends and, you know, got by, so to speak, with what I needed to do and just leave. Like, what were you really here for then? You know, like what was that about? It was just a fleeting experience, you know. And I kind of like I did have like some experience of like a countdown of like this is like you have, you know, this amount of time left and you know, you could choose a better path type option or like this is it. And I had this thrust within me like I have to live, like I can't die. I have to have a purposeful life. I have to be here for a reason and not have just, you know, been here. And that kind of like, even like with the trip or near-death experience type thing, that was also like a turning point too in the whole occasion of what was happening. It was a hachlata in my mind that like I had to either one, figure out why I'm here, or just like generally live a purposeful life and make sure I did something here that was meaningful.
But you're doing that, so awesome. Thank God. How did you access Torah?
So part of that experience after led me to like kind of a journey of walking with God. Like I would pray commonly. I realized that God was part of my life, and I started feeling like this interplay between my prayers and what God would say back in my life, and I just realized that it was really real. Not that I believed in God before, but it becomes like a real experience. And I would have questions about spirituality, and I would usually just look them up on my own and see like, oh, well, I'm Jewish, so what's the Jewish version of believing in this? Like, what do we think about this? Or what is it about this topic? And kind of was a little bit on my own search for answers a little bit, but it wasn't super connected with Judaism, like my whole journey right away. It was more of a spiritual
Quest.
path, and like trying to, have a relationship and, make sure that I'm doing what I think he generally wants me to do and be who he wants me to be. But when I got to college, I kind of realized like I'd had these times where I would realize like God clearly wants something from me. Like he wants me to be doing certain things. I don't know what those things are necessarily, but it's not just like I just pray to God and talk to him about, my aches and pains, so to speak. It's like, if there's a purpose, it must be that he has things that he wants me to be doing, or if there's something I could be giving him. And I went to a Hillel trying to go to a Yom Kippur event, and I didn't really have a perfect experience there. And I kept going for Friday night services trying to go, but they weren't there like ever. So I was like, this is weird. Like, I understand me not being there, but you guys not being there. Like, so I was looking for another place. A friend of mine that I met in class said that they're going to Chabad once or something. I don't know if I brought myself there first or they brought me first, one or the other. But I started going more and more to Chabad, and I realized when I was there, like, some point of the meal, a rabbi would get up and speak, and he would say stuff that was like perfectly in tune with my neshama's need right at that moment. Like I would feel like he was like walking around following me, and then like he would say exactly what I needed, or he's part of my dialogue with Hashem, and he somehow knows exactly what to say. And I just thought that was really weird. I was someone that was seeking and on a relationship with God, and here God has someone that's like kind of like a mouthpiece, a response for me. It was weird, and I didn't really understand it, but I was just like, it kept me coming back at least. And I just wanted to know, like, at some point I wanted to know what I believed. I know there's a God. I believe that Torah is true. I mean, we probably have it right. I like Judaism, but is even Judaism true? Is my own, so I wanted to know different things. I wanted to study a little bit more about what I believed and what that God wants. And especially because the more I kept going to Chabad, I kept seeing two specific things that like, where's that in the Torah, or like, like stuff like that. And I just wanted to know more and more answers, is like, to figure out why, if religious people all have it wrong, if these types of religious people just have it wrong.
What was it, Moshe, more than anything, which kind of let you see that it's truth and let you experience that truth, like one core or a few core experiences or concepts?
I wouldn't say, so concepts is easier than experiences. So when it came to like deciding logically, like I could definitely say like experiences that like help me feel that Torah's emes, but I would say the more logical things that I came to conclude, like it makes sense, even like scientifically that there was originally something infinite that existed, because you can't say that anything just came from nothing. You know, like even scientifically, you say that matter has to come from something, so to speak. And the only real conclusion is something that was always here versus like, because, and something that's infinite. You know, every other religion is based off of one person saying something and getting a group of people to agree. Whereas like Torah was given at Sinai in front of 3 million people, you know, and it was documented for years, the same experience. And every history book will tell you that we went from Egypt to Israel at some point. And, you know, all the artifacts show you that we went from Egypt to Israel. And there's only one account of the story. Whereas if there's 3 million people and there was other problems, you know, then you would have multiple people writing stories about that, just kind of like how you have 7,000 versions of the New Testament, you know, and 8,000, you know, 20,000 versions or whatever of the Quran, and only one version of the Torah. You know, if there was any mix up, then you'd have a clear pattern of why. The Torah talks about where if a prophet arises amongst you performing miracles, leading you to worship a different version of God, so to speak, an alien version of God, that you should see it as a test from God. And that, you know, even in, you know, days of Enosh and whatnot, they had people that came across saying like, look, I do these miracles, I'm special, therefore I'm saying that we should turn this, you know, honor system for the stars and the this and that into like full on like temple, and we could worship these things. And that's how idol worship started. And that applying to everything, but obviously applying to Christianity and Islam, which were the 2, you know, biggest religions in the world, you know, based from a book telling you that if you have a second and third book and these people are trying to give you a different version and tell you to take away mitzvahs and add mitzvahs, whatever, then it's probably not a real religion. It's probably from a false prophet. Things like that kind of like solidified my...
It's really interesting because a lot of people think that religion's about blind faith, but amazingly within Torah, within Judaism, as the Rambam points out, we don't do blind faith, we do knowledge. The Rambam starts with our job is to know God, to have that relationship. And as one of my teachers, Rabbi Tatz, always says, faith is the aftermath of knowledge, not a substitute for knowledge. And you've really just described kind of the logical process which one needs to go into before one kind of lets go and allows the emotions to take over. So that's really important.
Yeah, at the same time, it also was having with my relationship with God, with different mitzvahs that I would take on, or had, you know, as I was getting more and more answers to my questions, I was also having that, you know, but it was at least with like knowledge-backed reasoning behind why I know that. One, obviously, I don't really even need to prove that I believe in God, but I can even logically explain it to myself if I ever had a question, which it means like I had 0 doubts that there's God. But, you know, even that, I logically give myself an answer, and I have 0 doubts now that Torah is emes. But then I had to have answers, and also about customs, and about, you know, rabbis making laws, like all these different. I had to have logical answers for me to feel like my blind trust was properly directed in the right direction, not towards something that's fake, because there's millions of people that have blind trust towards fake things.
How long was your journey of kind of like when you were getting involved till it took you to like keeping Shabbos properly? Like 2 years? Like what was the longer?
Well, I guess the answer would be keeping Shabbos properly. That would be the one that makes the answer hard. I definitely so even on my own, when I was in college, I started like, okay, from Friday night to Saturday night, I'm not supposed to work. So work for me, I'm a college student. I'm not supposed to do college student work, which I was pretty on board with. But, you know, so that's how it started. Then like at some point I was there's some days that I just would sleep in my bed, like they take the day of rest literally. Like I really I rested for 25. I rested for a whole day. You know, this was like when I was in the beginning of college. I wasn't even like going to any Jewish places really at this point. I was just like, I knew that God had this concept of Shabbat, of Sabbath, and you know, like, you know, God wants me to do it. So I just kind of like did my own version of it for a little bit. And I didn't really know what it was. Also, when I would start going to the Chabad house, I would, you know, hypothetically, I would get my non-Jewish suite mate to drive me there because I didn't bring my car up for my freshman year. And, you know, so on Shabbos, I was being driven to, I was being driven to the Chabad house. You know, but in my eyes, I was still part of my keeping it experience. I would never have been able to keep Shabbos properly if I never did that. So
that's why we always say one step at a time. It's real. One step at a time gets you to where you need to be. You can't do it overnight. It doesn't work overnight.
Yeah. I wasn't even thinking about it too, because I would go like buy stuff at if I was sleeping in bed all day, it's still in the afternoon, I would go swipe my card at the food place, you know, eat my tray lunch for a Shabbos meal. And like, it was like, you know.
You know, the Chofetz Chaim says something amazing. Someone once came to the Chofetz Chaim who was an addicted smoker. He used to smoke 30 a day. And he said to the Chofetz Chaim, you know, I can't give up smoking Shabbos. Like, what can I do? The Chofetz Chaim said, just next week, just try 29. Just smoke 29. Just do one less. Isn't that deep? Isn't that beautiful idea from the Chofetz Chaim? Just
Yeah.
one step at a time. For you, that's your Shabbos. You normally do 30. On Shabbos, you're going to do 29. That's awesome. That's a step closer to the divine. That's a beautiful way that we should all look at growth. Just one step at a time. Do what's real. Do what's organic. Don't force it.
Also, later on, one of my rabbis would often quote like a similar thing, like, the way you grow, you would say, is you take one thing that you are doing that you should be doing, and one thing that you aren't doing that you should be doing, and you use that as your barometer for growth.
Nice.
I always like that.
So what I find really fascinating now about moving to the music world is like you growing and you got into Chabad, like hardcore and real Torah and rabbi, and you've got all these beautiful holy Sfarim behind you that every good Chabad rabbi's got behind in their homes. I've got the Tanya behind me because I'm like more like I'm trying to do a bit of everything, but you've got the beautiful proper Likutei Sichos I can see there from the Rebbe. So my question is, how on earth do you marry and synthesize that with a hip hop artist, which is so much kind of what I ostensibly would look at as kind of the other side of the world, and a very much more darker, secular, materialistic, animalistic almost kind of world. How on earth have you married both worlds and synthesized them?
So there's probably like 4 answers that I'd want to give right now. I mean, just to start, like, part of my journey, like being interested in, you know, writing music and lyrics and stuff when I was in high school, is when I started to change my life. It wasn't just I started changing my life. I started to see on this path with God, like what is going on? Like, I see kid after kid that grew up like the nice little guy that like becomes like, you know, I don't know. It depends on the person, but they get so steeped into this, you know, social experience of being a student and pop culture running the general population's way of life when you're at that age, that they become completely estranged from who you knew they were when you were like in 3rd grade and you knew the kid. So I just saw that experience over and over again. And I was so into music, and I had this idea of like, I could utilize music to bring people back with me, so to speak, as I try to live a more good and meaningful life. And this was before really Judaism was center stage of any of that. So it's something that I wanted to do for the right, you know, it was like something I believed it was like a calling for me or something. And like part of that meaningful experience of like, wow, this is something that I do that I really enjoy. And according to other people, I'm really good at it. And I really would like to, and also people listen to me. Like I was a popular kid in school, you know, and people would gather around when we're doing rap sessions at parties and stuff like that. You know, it'd be cool to utilize my voice for a better cause, even just in the small social circle of my high school or the multiple high schools that I was socially involved with. So, you know, and who knows? And back then too, it wasn't so clear any direction. Like, you know, maybe maybe you'll make it someday in that realm, and then it will be beyond just these 4 schools or whatever. You know, so and you know, that could be part of your meaning. Is that like mass amount of people changing with you, because it's not just a problem in South Florida, it's a problem all throughout the world, all throughout America. You know, people are, you know, getting lost to a different form of life that you get engrossed in when you get in your teenage years. So I was really concerned. I was concerned. And then also when I started visiting my brothers in college and also going to, when I was in college, like you see it on a higher level, so to speak, you see it more drastically. So I was just like, this is it. This is what I want to do. And I think also during that time period and probably like 5 years before, like hip hop became more soulful in some regards. Like there's more figures that came out making more music that was more meaningful and more colorful than just like, you know, all the gangster rap that hip hop's known for. Really, for me, it was like a natural thing. It was like, this is something that you could do with music, and this is something that people on a smaller, you know, in small areas of their, you know, even though they talk about mostly trafe stuff, like they have their things, you know, in that that they make meaningful. Ultimately, poetry is what you write, and if you're writing things about the typical hip hop, you know, of the 90s, then they'll probably sound like gang, you know, shot this, and I hate cops, that, you know. But if you but if you make it, you know, if you take any poem in the world that you felt was meaningful and you turn it into a hip hop song, you know, you just made probably a pretty cool song.
It's really interesting, Moshe, because Maimonides, again, I'm quoting the Rambam a bit, Maimonides asks, like, is music in itself, is it neutral? Or, for example, he asks, we have that with Wagner in classical music, if someone had strong Nazi views and strong wicked views, are we allowed to listen to their music? Does that taint the music? Does the musician kind of corrupt the music, or can music stay neutral and it's really up to us to direct it and to navigate it the way you want? Maimonides says it is neutral and it's up to us, as you said. And if you want to direct that art to meaning and to connection and to love, then it can be. And it maybe is that why that when I listen to certain hip hop and rap, I'm very sensitive to energies. I just feel that darkness, and I just feel some negativity, and it like hurts my soul. On the other hand, I suppose when I listen to you, right, there's light, there's joy, there's connection. So would you say that it just really depends where you're driving and who the driver is?
So yeah, I think that there's a neutral energy of music. Absolutely. I mean, like we say, yeah, it's a Torah principle really when it comes to music, that it's neutral energy. It's klipa snoga, and you know, it depends on where you drive it. I do think that, you know, I wouldn't say people having their darkness, you know, like David Melch says, like, because I'm black, I'm nicer, so to speak. Like it's like his darkness is a positive thing. You know, that there's a beauty to the darkness. even in the dark parts of our lives and being a person, you could utilize that in hip hop or any form of music to depict something positive, even if it's coming from a darkness. So the thing is that most people speaking on the darkness don't go there. It doesn't get transformed. It's just the darkness. Any form of poetry, music, anything like that, you could express your transformation of darkness, or you could express just light. And that's your choice. You're uplifting it that by doing that. But if you're just going to talk about the darkness, it's just probably going to hang there in the klipa aspect.
Beautiful. Do you view yourself more as a rabbi who raps, or a rapper who's a rabbi sometimes?
I don't really identify myself as anything. I don't know. I know that's a big thing in this generation. I identify myself as I mean, these things are just an expression of who I am, so, King David was a poet and Talmud Chacham and a king and a war leader and, a strategist, all these different thousands of things that King David was. But we don't say King David was, we just say King David. You knew King David for who he is. I just feel like and people in general, I think we get really big in boxes a lot of times because of profession. What is your profession is a big thing in this generation. But ultimately, I just see it as a soul expression of who I am. When you reach a certain place of your learning and they start calling you have the title, you technically are a rav, or a rabbi or whatever. It's an expression. I don't see it as a rabbi who raps or a rapper who rabbis. If anything, those labels make me irk a little bit and make me think well, when I think of the word rapper, I think of this. When I think of the word rabbi, I think of this. And it's just neither of those do I feel comfortable about just saying that this is who I am, so.
And I think that's really healthy. I do a lot of life coaching, and in coaching, that's one of the principles I try and help people to understand, that we are a combination of so many, where I'm a father and a brother and a son and a grandfather now and a friend, and I like music, and we're part of the divine soul, which is really our essence, and the beauty of being part of God is we're capable of so many aspects. And I think that can allow you to be not directed by peer pressure, not directed by the identity and attachment, and allow one to be really genuine and who you are. So I love that. I'm going to be quoting you going forward, if that's all right.
No, go for sure. I mean, don't need to give me the credit either, but yeah, like you said, you guys already have it in your course, in your life coaching.
Yeah, no, I love that. How do you balance fame, ego with humility? So, for example, a lot of things we teach on JNETWORK is the importance of erosion of the ego and the importance of humility, and real greatness comes when you kind of let go. And quoting King David is the ultimate one to say, Anochi telas, I'm a worm. So, but yet in the pop industry, especially, it seems it's the ultimate celeb, where if you do a gig and everyone's going to be after your autograph and everyone's going to be trying to massage your ego, how do you deal with that? And what advice would you give to people?
I mean, I say this probably in every interview, the Alter Rebbe says that when a person gains more success, they should also become more humble. Because when you gain success, you realize that it's really from Hashem. You don't really deserve anything. You didn't do anything. Everything's from above, and people work their entire lives for things that they never manifest, and people barely do anything and they manifest. So you just see more and more about and also I'd say different parts of my journey, I deserve things to work out more this way than at this point in my life, than at this point, because I feel like I put in this much work here and this much work here, and you get any person that succeeds, they can tell you that like it doesn't always make sense. Most of the time it doesn't. Why and when they started seeing like things start manifesting in the way they want. And I think that's just a testament to that. It's from above, you know. And you know, like it's obviously we work Alpi Teva, and you know, uh Alpi Teva, if things work out at a certain point, you know, that's great. But you still know that it's from above, if you really are honest with yourself. Um, and so I think that's one aspect, is that I just know that it's from Hashem, and I'm thankful for it. And you know, he blesses. He's the one blessing me with it at every moment. And if it's not there one moment, that's also His will. You know, God forbid. So like, it's all in His hands. The other aspect is that I don't know. I don't want to speak critically about surroundings, but you know, as a from Jew, we don't honor these things. We don't care about fame. If anything, it's a bad thing. You know, especially it's a concerning thing. You know, like, oh no, is he going to become the next so and so guy that, you know, just completely went off the deck after they gained a little bit of attention? You know, or is he going to do another thing that another person that was famous in that area did wrong, and they eventually were blacklisted, so to speak, from the from community? Or like, I think these things kind of like have jaded people also in my general surroundings, that like, not only do we not care about these things as from Yidden, but we also like kind of, a lot of from Yidden kind of shun it. Like it's like a negative thing, and it's like something we want to keep away from us because we don't know what might happen. And you know, it's scary for spiritual leaders sometimes, because this is a person that more people might look up to than me. And like, it's just there's a lot of concerns. And I think being in that type of environment, and also many people wanting to keep me in check themselves by like either being insulting or being really demeaning about what's going on with me, keeps me humble, you know. So you know, so I mean, ultimately it's like a positive.
Do you not agree with that vision, what you were describing?
um so I see how it protects from things. Like it protects from, like, if we just made the thing, if we all just make it a really negative thing, then we protect from any positive negativity that could come out from it. But I don't think it's always the best thing. Like, and I don't think every single from environment necessarily acts the same way towards it. I think that's just particularly the experiences that I've had. I know that, you know, there's other artists that I'm friends with that had the opposite experiences, just like growing as a success in the secular world, the way that things react. But even if you're a success in the secular world, you also gain haters as you grow. And you also gain backlash and negativity as you grow, because Joe Schmo plays the flute and they wanted to make it in music, or Joe, you know, this other person had their kid listens to you when they go home from work, from school, and that, but when you ask them to do their homework, they're not listening to them. Like it's like there's so many parts to it that I understand fully why it exists, especially in the from a more religious setting. I don't think it's fully positive. I think also it's the Klippas Noga. Like Rabbi Manis Freeman talks about how fame in the secular world is about, I have intention. Look at me, just for the sake of my ego. The proper way of utilizing attention or fame, which he's a famous rabbi, right? He's not shunning it. It's a good thing. Is that now that I have your attention, how am I impacting your life? Am I impacting your life positively and keeping yourself in check as the person that has that attention, to make sure that you're a positive influence on your surroundings, and that you are representative of good morals, and that you're a good person and you do good things, and you're, as an artist, your music is positive, good music, even if it's sometimes about the darkness turning to light, you know, even if it talks about your own darkness, because that's part of being an artist, is sometimes talking about your darkness. But, you know, that it reflects a positive overall message and outlook of who a person is and their journey with God. So I think it's a positive thing. I think it's Klipas Noga also, just like music. It depends on how it's utilized. And I don't think to shun it is positive, because it doesn't allow anyone to grow in those areas that already exist in the world. So when that kid goes off the derech in that community, that the big hip hop, music artist makes it, or whatever, is starting to make it, and he's listening to Travis Scott because that's who he sees as honorable, but in his circle, they made the guy down the street into like as out of fear. So maybe he could have been a big fan of that type of music, you know, for example, and it's kosher and it's not negative and whatever, and that kid wouldn't necessarily have to seek that experience in the secular world. So I think like music, you know, all the things that I do that gain me attention are generally Klipas Noga, and I use them positively, thank God, or at least I'm always trying to, and that allows for art and different things that people could enjoy in the religious world that may not already be there. And if they don't have that, and if it's shunned, and if it's made into something negative because of fear, then those people don't have access to something that they might be seeking, and they're going to seek.
Sure, and that's what's really one of the things beautiful about Hasidus is we believe that you can integrate into the world because everywhere's God. God's everywhere. We don't have to separate per se. Our job is to integrate, but critically, I think what you said, like the Zohar says, to influence as opposed to be influenced, to almost be within the sun and the moon. The moon only takes the light of the sun and reflects it. So the Zohar, Sam says, our job is to be the sun, is to have that opportunity like you have, where you have now millions of people who are listening to you, and now it's going to be up to you what message you're going to say. And if you're, please God, you know, Hashem's going to bless you to continue to bring your own individual spiritual light out there, which is only going to bring love and kindness and oneness. And that's the way to do it. That's a beautiful way to live.
Yeah. And I think when people act at it like that, I think that's the general like way things have moved. Like we've been more appreciative of these types of things in the Jewish world. I think it allows for a certain beauty in the Jewish world that doesn't exist without that. You know, everyone adds their own specific thing. But I do see like how, you know, when you come out with these horrible movies from Jews, it's usually from a small group of people, you know, that kind of like create a bad experience for one or two people because around these subjects. And if we had a better approach to some of them, you know, I think there'd be less people trying to generalize a small experience, you know, to making it a big one. And also it would allow that beauty to be more commonplace in the Jewish world if we didn't have small messing it up, so to speak. But I think it's a good thing. I mean, I think it's only positive. It's just person's utilizing of it.
If you had to say a rap, which would be the rap, which is your legacy to this world, if you had kind of one rap, what would it contain? What would be your lyrics that you'd want to give as MOSHE REUVEN's legacy to the spiritual world, to the universe, and Tofshin Pei base? We're in 5782 going into 5783. What is that? What would you give to the world? What would it be?
I'm not going to give a simple answer, sorry, but I would. I guess that's a Jewish thing. I mean, but you know, I would say that first and foremost, I don't want it to just be one thing. I want it to be an outlay of a bunch of things, you know, because life is very multidimensional. But I would say principles and things that are essential for me to represent is a relationship with God, a journey with God. You know, an expression of working on myself and trying to be the best that I can be. And, you know, when we see people trying to grow, that's when we're most impacted. You know, when you see the person that lost 300 pounds, you know, it's more inspiring than, you know, just some person that always had, you know, it was always perfectly fit. You know, so just to be constantly growing in a positive direction, and you know, to live a meaningful life, to live our purpose, that we all have a purpose. You know, as Simon Jacobson says, everyone has, well, it's from the Zohar, but everyone has a note that they are here to play in God's orchestra. So that part of the Zohar, you know, that's talking about how this all is God's orchestra, like to be in tune with our note, to play together in harmony. You know, just to be the best version of ourselves that we could be, that, you know, that Mashiach version of ourselves, have our own personal redemption, and that will help bring the ultimate redemption.
I mean, finally, what is your favorite, like, Devar Torah, your favorite concept that you've ever heard or been taught?
Wow, that's hard.
Like one of your favorites, or a cool story, or just to finish off, we're all about inspiring the masses. So this is the way that I like to conclude, like a nice cool story or a nice cool idea that you've learned or been taught.
Okay, well, I could tell you about the story that I recently heard that I thought was cool.
Love the Baal Shem Tov.
It's going to be very abridged and not perfectly said, but because it's a very long story. But basically, the Hasid of the Baal Shem Tov that started to get entrenched in black magic, and he had all these non-Jewish friends that were, you know, very entrenched with it. And he was still a Hasid, he was still part of the Klal, but he was definitely moving in a direction where he wanted to really become entrenched in this black magic. And so one night they were at the Baal Shem Tov's house, and he, you know, all of a sudden, there's all these Hasidim around, and all of a sudden he starts feeling really warm. And he starts taking off his coat, taking off his jacket, taking off his hat. And no matter what he does, he just gets warmer and warmer. And I think he said something to the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov suggests that he goes step outside for a little bit and come back. So he steps outside, and no matter what he's doing out there, because it's freezing cold out there, but he's just getting warmer and warmer. And he just starts walking further away from the place that they are at, and eventually starts running. And the further he goes, the warmer he becomes, but he's also becoming colder because he's more deeply entrenched in the cold out there with less things covering him. And then he loses taste. Like at some point he like pat faints and whatever, and he wakes up the next day, and there's these older Hasidim, I guess, in town that hosted him. That he wakes up and he's like, I need water. So they bring him water, and they're like, wow, we're so happy you're up and you're okay, etc. And they ask, what's your name? You know, they just stumble upon him basically. And they're like, what's your name? Who are you? Like, etc. And he doesn't even know his name. He's like lost. He almost doesn't remember a lot of his experiences prior. And they said to him, okay, we'll just call you Peter. So probably not Peter, but you know, that's how the story goes. So they start calling him Peter, and Peter has to figure out what he's going to do with his life now that he's just wound up at this people's house and he doesn't remember his life and he doesn't remember who he is. So they have him start working on their farm and doing stuff around the place. And they're like, Peter, we see something in you. You could do much more. You could become like a general in the army or something here. And so he starts, you know, doing all the things to join the ranks of the army. And then he becomes a general. And when he's on one of his missions as part of this army, and I apologize, he wasn't part of the same community. He just went so far that he just ended up somewhere. So when he's as his general, he passes a town, and all of a sudden the town reminds him of something, like, oh, I was once a Hasid of the Baal Shem Tov. And he starts getting recollection of everything, and he's like, wow, now I'm this big guy in the general, like, of this army, and I used to be this Hasid of the Baal Shem Tov. And he's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go show the Baal Shem Tov who I became as, like, involved in the world, a general in the army. A Hasid of the Baal Shem Tov becomes this big general, and he brings his whole flock to where he recalls that the Baal Shem Tov is located, and he goes in the house. And even though at this point 15 years had transpired, he was so excited to see the Baal Shem Tov in some point and realize and show him, look at what became of me. And he goes in and he knocks on the door, and he hears the Baal Shem Tov's voice, and he's like, oh, I remember that this is the Baal Shem Tov. And he's like, the general of the Tsar's army says that you have to open up. And he keeps, like, pressuring that, like, he has to open up the door. And the Baal Shem Tov lets him in, and the Baal Shem Tov says, I told you to walk outside, but you didn't. I told you not to go too far. And he realizes that he basically goes back in time 15 years. And what just happened is that he came back into the Baal Shem Tov's home, and the whole thing wasn't a real experience. And he said to himself that if the Baal Shem Tov could do this to me, where he basically made me live 15 years of life to realize that I was going down a bad path, like this black magic stuff, which is pretty cool. They do pretty cool stuff. It's nothing compared to what the Baal Shem Tov has. And so he does tshuva, and he decides to live a straight path. And luckily, he didn't live 15 years in like in a foreign way of life, so to speak.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Just before we started, I just opened up a sefer and came across this following idea. It says at the beginning of this week's Torah section, Re'ei nasati lifneichem hayom. See that I'm bringing before you today. Moses is talking about the blessings that God is showering to the Jewish people. And the Kotzker Rebbe asks, what does it mean, Re'ei, in the singular? It should have said Re'u, see. Lifneichem is the plural, so it should have been consistent and say see in the plural, Lifneichem plural. Why does it say singular? And the Kotzker Rebbe says something so beautiful. I really feel it's connected to what you were saying today, which is whenever God blesses us, each individual is a different world, and we all receive our blessings differently. And for actually one person, it's a blessing. For the other person, it could be a curse, because ultimately we're all incredibly unique. We're all, as you said, playing a different note in the orchestra with a different role to play, a different unique mission in this world. And that's why, on one hand, God is showering us all with blessings, but it's re'eh. We all need to see it with our own unique eyes. We've all got very different eyes, different environments. Like you're from the other side of the world, from I am, a different country, different cultures, but yet, and we see the world on one hand so differently and uniquely, but on the other hand, we're connected and we're one. And it's this paradox of there's oneness, but there's individuality within that oneness as well. And I really enjoyed that idea from the Kotzker Rebbe I just saw before you came in. Finally, maybe one last question for you, and then I'll let you go, which is, you've really been blessed, as I said, thank God, in the area of in entrepreneurship and in music. If you were to give advice for those who are listening today who would really like to succeed in their life and maybe finding a lot of obstacles and finding it hard to achieve their dreams, what advice would you give them to help them achieve their dreams, whether it be in business or whether it be in music or maybe even in spirituality? Is there a kind of common advice that's worked for you that you would give?
Well, obviously everyone needs a mashpia to like help them figure out how to navigate.
And mashpia means kind of a teacher, a guide, a influencer, right?
Yeah, someone to speak to about where you're going, because it is true. It's nothing. None of these things are very simple. It's case by case, time time by time, you know, like depends on where you're at in life and what's going on. I would say the biggest thing that's allowed me to get to where I am in almost everything is just like, I mean, obviously everything's from God's bracha, but as far as like practically what I did, it just kept going in my areas of life. And even when I didn't have any like sure pathway of how anything's going to work out, I just knew that, oh, this is something I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it well one day. And I mean, you know, if I never thought like that, then I wouldn't have done anything in any of it. And I wouldn't, you know, no one would be asking me to do any interviews, that'd be for sure. And I think that's the only thing that's allowed it, is that I just kept the faith that there's a reason for these things, and maybe they're not always going to manifest the way I want or when I want or how I want, but they could manifest. And so actually and it kind of reminds me of this concept of empty vessels, that, you know, like we put the vessels out and we hope that it'll be filled with oil. We hope that it'll be filled with light, you know. And we get too carried away with how it gets filled and what fills it and when, if it's possible to fill it. We're just supposed to put out the vessels, you know, and God willing, he fills it with light, you know. And sometimes you'll have empty vessels for years and they one day get filled with light. So I would say that's the epitome of what's happened for me, because I would have told you that 17, 15, 16, I could have and should have been, you know, the biggest hip hop artist in the world, you know, whatever. And I would probably even tell you that I was more talented at it then than I am now. But because it was such an obsession at those ages of my life. That's where I picked up a lot of the skills, but those were the vessels, you know, and God fills it with light when he decides, you know.
Beautiful. Thank you, Stowe. To see us out, everybody, please enjoy the hit song, listened by over 1.5 million people. Now, I think 2 million now on Spotify. You Are Not Alone by MOSHE REUVEN. MOSHE, thank you so much for joining us on JNETWORK. Really, really appreciate your invaluable time. May Hashem bless you and your family with invaluable, infinite blessings, especially in this month. We're about to embark in Elul, which is, as we've learned from the Balatani, the king is in the field. The king is in the field. Hashem is so close to all of us, so that blessings, please God, will be even more tangible and felt more, and it should be felt in your lives, you know, all of our lives. Please God, Mashiach should come super soon, and we can sing Moshe songs with Mashiach in the room as well. Please God. So
Amen.
Really thank you.